The soft jazz music drifted through Bella Vista's dining room as 28 guests celebrated my parents' 27th wedding anniversary. Candles flickered on crisp white tablecloths while servers in black uniforms moved gracefully between tables, delivering perfectly plated dishes to celebrate Margaret and Charles Rivera's milestone evening at the city's most exclusive restaurant. I stood near the kitchen door in my simple black dress, watching my family perform their usual theater of success and sophistication. My older brother Antonio commanded attention at the head table, regaling everyone with stories of his latest real estate developments and million-dollar property sales. My sister Carmen held court near the windows, describing her husband's cardiology practice and their recent purchase of a vacation home in Cabo San Lucas. Meanwhile, I occupied my traditional role as the family disappointment, the daughter who had somehow failed to live up to the Rivera family standards despite every advantage they'd given me. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. My parents had chosen Bella Vista for their anniversary celebration because it represented everything they valued: elegance, exclusivity, impeccable service, and the kind of sophisticated atmosphere that impressed their business associates and social circle. What they didn't know was that their failure daughter owned the restaurant where they were celebrating, along with 7 other upscale establishments throughout the city. But tonight wasn't about culinary holdings or restaurant empires or the $127 million hospitality business I'd built while they thought I was drifting through life without direction. Tonight was about celebrating Margaret and Charles Rivera, the successful couple who had built a beautiful life together and raised children they could be proud of. Well, most of them anyway. And then the buyer offered full asking price, no contingencies, Antonio was saying, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. $3.2 million cash deal closed in 2 weeks. That's the Rivera touch. We know how to read the market and deliver results. Appreciative murmurs rippled through the elegant dining room. Dad beamed with paternal pride, raising his wine glass in salute to his successful son. That's my Antonio, Dad declared, his voice warm with satisfaction. Always thinking strategically, always closing the big deals. You've got the Rivera instincts for business, son. The ability to see opportunity where others see risk. More applause. More validation of the Rivera family success story. And Carmen, Mom added, turning to my sister, tell everyone about Kevin's new medical center. Carmen practically glowed under the attention. Kevin's opening his 3rd location next month. The demand for specialized cardiac care has been incredible. We're also looking at investing in a medical device company that could revolutionize heart surgery. Brilliant. Dad's enthusiasm filled the room. Innovation, expansion, building something that lasts. That's what I'm talking about. That's what success looks like in this family. I adjusted my position near the kitchen door and caught the eye of Marcus, my head chef, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Everything was running smoothly in the kitchen, just as it had every night for the past 3 years since I'd opened Bella Vista as the flagship restaurant of my hospitality empire. Isabella, Aunt Sophia's voice cut through my thoughts. I turned to find Mom's sister approaching with the gentle smile she reserved for family members who needed encouragement. Aunt Sophia, I replied warmly. Are you enjoying your dinner? The food is exquisite, she said, glancing around the elegant dining room. Your parents chose well. This place has such wonderful atmosphere. They had chosen well, though not in the way she imagined. How are you doing, Mija? Aunt Sophia continued, her voice taking on the concerned tone that usually preceded difficult conversations about my future. Your mother tells me you're still working in food service? Food service. As if building a restaurant empire that employed over 300 people was simply serving food to customers. I work in hospitality management, I said carefully. That's wonderful. It's important to have steady work, even if it's not exactly a career. She paused delicately. Have you given any more thought to going back to school? You're so smart, Isabella. You could be a lawyer like your cousin Miguel, or maybe get into business like Antonio. Back to school. I had an MBA from Wharton and a degree in culinary arts from the Culinary Institute of America, but my family had somehow missed those details while focusing on my siblings' achievements. I appreciate the suggestion, I said diplomatically. Of course, there's no shame in service work, Aunt Sophia continued with well-meaning condescension. Not everyone can be a doctor or a lawyer. The world needs people who are willing to do honest work, even if it's not glamorous. Honest work. Like building the most successful restaurant group in the city and revolutionizing the local dining scene with innovative cuisine and exceptional service standards. Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of Dad tapping his wine glass with a silver knife, calling for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dad announced, his voice carrying easily through Bella Vista's dining room, "if I could have everyone's attention for a moment." The room quieted as 28 guests turned toward the head table where my parents sat, both radiant with the glow of a successful marriage celebrated in style. 27 years ago, Dad began, Margaret and I promised to build something beautiful together. Looking around this room tonight, seeing all of you, our family, our friends, our community, I think we've succeeded beyond our wildest dreams. Polite applause filled the restaurant. I noticed several other diners glancing over curiously, wondering about the private celebration happening in their favorite restaurant. "We've been blessed with wonderful children," Dad continued, his voice full of emotion. "Antonio has built a real estate empire and married a lovely woman who's given us beautiful grandchildren. Carmen married a successful doctor and has become a pillar of our community through her charity work." The spotlight of family approval shone warmly on my siblings, who accepted the praise with practiced humility. "But tonight," Dad's tone shifted slightly, "I want to talk about something more difficult. Something that Margaret and I have been struggling with for several years now." A subtle tension rippled through the room. Guests shifted in their chairs, sensing that the celebratory mood was about to change direction. "We have a third child," Dad said, his voice becoming strained. "Isabella. Our youngest daughter." Every eye in the restaurant turned toward me. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like a defendant awaiting verdict. "Isabella is 29 years old," Dad continued, "and she has consistently made choices that go against everything this family stands for. Responsibility, ambition, building something meaningful with your life." The words hit like individual hammers. 28 family members and friends listening to my father systematically dismantle my existence at their anniversary celebration. "We gave Isabella every advantage," Mom joined in, her voice tight with disappointment. "The best education, family connections, financial support when she needed it. And what has she done with those advantages?" The rhetorical question hung in the air like smoke from a fire. "She works as a waitress," Mom announced with the kind of shame usually reserved for criminal convictions. 29 years old with a college degree, and she serves food to strangers for tips. Waitress. The owner and CEO of Culinary Holdings was being described as a waitress to a room full of successful people. "We've tried everything," Dad continued, building momentum. "Tough love, gentle encouragement, setting boundaries, offering opportunities. Nothing works. Isabella seems determined to waste her life in service jobs instead of building a real career." Real career. While Dad was lamenting my lack of ambition, Culinary Holdings was preparing to open 3 new locations in neighboring cities, expanding our reputation for innovative dining experiences and exceptional hospitality standards. "The truth is," Mom said, her voice cracking with emotion, "we're embarrassed by Isabella. Embarrassed to tell our friends what she does for a living. Embarrassed to explain why one of our children chose mediocrity when the others chose excellence." Mediocrity. The woman who had revolutionized the local restaurant scene and created dining experiences that food critics compared to establishments in New York and Paris was apparently choosing mediocrity. "So tonight," Dad announced with the finality of a judge passing sentence, "we're making a difficult decision. Isabella, you're not our daughter anymore." The words exploded through the dining room like a bomb detonating. Guests gasped audibly. Several people turned to stare at me with mixtures of shock and pity. The entire restaurant, not just our private party, seemed to hold its breath. "You're not our daughter anymore," Dad repeated, his voice carrying to every corner of Bella Vista. "This is our last meal together. After tonight, we don't want you at family gatherings, we don't want you calling us, we don't want you in our lives." The silence that followed was absolute and devastating. 28 people watching a father publicly disown his daughter at an anniversary celebration. "You've made your choice," Mom added, tears streaming down her face. "You've chosen to be a failure, to waste everything we gave you, to embarrass this family with your lack of ambition. We can't watch it anymore." I felt something strange happen in that moment. Instead of the crushing shame and desperate need to defend myself that usually consumed me during family confrontations, I felt calm. almost relieved. They had finally said what they'd been thinking for years. I understand, I said quietly, my voice somehow remaining steady despite the earthquake happening around me. Dad blinked, clearly expecting tears or pleas or dramatic protests. That's it? No begging us to reconsider? No promises to change? I shook my head. No, Dad. You've made your position clear. I respect your decision. The calm acceptance seemed to unsettle him more than emotional pleading would have. Good, Mom said, though her voice suggested she found my composure disturbing. Then there's nothing more to say. I looked around the room at 28 faces that had shaped my entire life. Family members, family friends, people who had watched me grow up and had now witnessed my public excommunication from the Rivera family. You're right, I said, standing up slowly. There's nothing more to say here. I walked toward the kitchen, my heels clicking softly against the polished hardwood floors. Behind me, I could hear uncomfortable murmurs as guests tried to process what they'd just witnessed. I pushed through the swinging doors into Bella Vista's bustling kitchen, where my staff was executing the evening service with the precision of a Swiss watch. 32 chefs, sous chefs, prep cooks and kitchen staff working in perfect harmony to create the dining experience that had earned Bella Vista 3 James Beard nominations and a reputation as the best restaurant in the city. Chef Isabella. Marcus approached immediately, his face showing concern. Is everything all right? You look upset. Marcus had been with me since Bella Vista opened 3 years ago. He was one of the few people who knew that the young woman the Rivera family had just disowned was actually his boss, the owner of the restaurant empire they all worked for. Marcus, I said, my voice steady and clear, I need you to do something for me. Anything, chef. I looked around the kitchen at my staff, talented, dedicated professionals who had helped me build something extraordinary while my family thought I was serving coffee and taking orders. The Rivera anniversary party in the main dining room, I said. They just made it clear that they don't consider me family anymore. I think we should give them an anniversary dinner they'll never forget. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. He'd worked in enough restaurants to understand the implications of that request. What did you have in mind, chef? I thought about 29 years of being the disappointing daughter, 3 years of building something revolutionary while they assumed I was failing, and 10 minutes of being publicly disowned by people who had never bothered to learn what I actually did for a living. First, I said, I want you to gather the entire staff. Kitchen servers, management, everyone. Tell them to meet me in the private dining room next to where the Rivera party is sitting. The entire staff? Everyone who's not actively cooking or serving other customers. This won't take long. Marcus nodded and began moving through the kitchen, quietly gathering people. Within minutes, 26 members of Bella Vista's staff had assembled in the adjacent private dining room. Everyone, I said, addressing my team, you know that I own this restaurant and 6 others in the city. What you might not know is that the Rivera anniversary party in the next room just publicly disowned me because they think I'm a failure who works as a waitress. Several staff members exchanged glances. They'd all heard my family's harsh words through the thin walls between the dining rooms. So I want to show them exactly what kind of service their failure daughter provides, I continued. I want you to give the Rivera party the most extraordinary dining experience in Bella Vista's history. Every dish perfect, every detail flawless, every interaction memorable. I want them to understand what exceptional hospitality actually looks like. Chef, Elena, my sommelier, raised her hand tentatively. Should we tell them who you really are? I considered the question. The moment of revelation would come, but timing was everything. Not yet, I said. First, let them experience what we do here. Then we'll see if they're capable of recognizing excellence when it's right in front of them. The staff dispersed to their stations with renewed energy. I watched through the small window between dining rooms as servers began delivering additional courses that weren't on the Rivera party's original menu. Amuse-bouches that showcased our molecular gastronomy techniques. Wine pairings that demonstrated Elena's expertise with rare vintages. Presentation styles that had earned us recognition in Food and Wine magazine. My family initially seemed puzzled by the additional courses, but as the meal progressed, their confusion turned to appreciation. Dad complimented the server on the exceptional wine selection. Mom raved about a dessert that had taken our pastry chef 3 months to perfect. Antonio asked detailed questions about the preparation techniques for dishes he'd never encountered before. They were experiencing the very best of what I had built without knowing they were experiencing it. After 2 hours of watching my staff provide flawless service to people who had just disowned their boss, I decided it was time for the final course. I walked back into the main dining room, where the Rivera anniversary party was finishing their desserts and coffee. The atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Instead of the tense aftermath of family drama, guests were buzzing with excitement about the exceptional meal they'd just experienced. "Excuse me," I said, approaching Dad's chair. "I hope you've enjoyed your anniversary dinner." Dad looked up, surprised to see me again. "Isabella? I thought you'd left." "I did leave the family conversation," I said carefully. "But I wanted to make sure your anniversary celebration was memorable." "It has been," Mom admitted, her earlier anger somewhat softened by wine and exceptional food. "This restaurant is truly remarkable. We've never experienced service like this anywhere." "I'm glad you enjoyed it," I said. "The staff here takes great pride in their work." "They should," Antonio chimed in. "This meal was extraordinary. The wine pairings, the presentation, the flavor combinations, it's like nothing I've ever tasted." "The molecular gastronomy was particularly impressive," Carmen added. "How do they create those flavor spheres that burst in your mouth?" "Advanced culinary techniques," I replied. "It takes years of training and considerable investment in specialized equipment." "This place must be incredibly expensive to operate," Dad observed with his businessman's eye for financial details. "The quality of ingredients, the level of service, the sophisticated presentation, the overhead must be enormous." "It is," I agreed. "Running a restaurant at this level requires significant capital investment, extensive staff training, and constant innovation to maintain standards." "I can imagine," Mom said. "The owner must be quite wealthy to sustain this kind of operation. And very sophisticated to understand what discerning diners want." The owner. The family failure who had just been disowned for her lack of ambition and her embarrassing waitressing job. "Actually," I said, "I'd like to introduce you to the owner." I walked to the center of the dining room and gently clinked a wine glass with a spoon, drawing attention from all 28 guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "I want to thank you for celebrating Margaret and Charles Rivera's anniversary at Bella Vista tonight. As you've experienced, our staff takes great pride in providing exceptional dining experiences for special occasions." Polite applause from the guests, who assumed I was just another restaurant employee making a courtesy announcement. "I also want to take this opportunity," I continued, "to introduce you to someone who has been instrumental in creating tonight's memorable experience." I paused, looking directly at my parents. "The owner and executive chef of Bella Vista, and 6 other restaurants in our city, is someone you know very well. Someone who has spent the past 3 years building what food critics have called the most innovative dining experience in the Southwest." Dad's eyebrows furrowed slightly, sensing something significant was coming. "Someone who was just told tonight that she's no longer part of the Rivera family because her career choices were embarrassing and her lack of ambition was a disappointment." Mom's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "I'm Isabella Rivera, owner and executive chef of Culinary Holdings, and tonight you've been dining in my restaurant." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the espresso machine hissing in the distant kitchen. Dad stared at me like I was speaking in a foreign language. Mom's mouth had fallen open. Antonio and Carmen exchanged looks of complete bewilderment. "Your restaurant?" Dad managed finally. "My restaurant. Along with Café Luna, Solstice Bistro, The Garden Room, Maritime Grill, Copper and Sage and Elevation. 7 restaurants that comprise Culinary Holdings, which I founded and have been operating for the past 6 years." "But you're a waitress," Mom whispered. "I'm a restaurant owner and executive chef. I have an MBA from Wharton and graduated summa cum laude from the Culinary Institute of America. I employ over 300 people and generate approximately $127 million in annual revenue." The number seemed to hit the table like physical objects. "127 million?" Antonio repeated numbly. "Million. With an But how?" Carmen struggled to find words. "How did we not know?" "Because you never asked," I said simply. "For 6 years, you assumed I was failing without ever wondering what I was actually building." I walked closer to their table, addressing the family who had just disowned me. Tonight, Dad, you said I work as a waitress and that you were embarrassed to tell people what I do for a living. What I do for a living is create dining experiences that food critics compare to the finest restaurants in New York and Paris. Dad's face had gone pale. Mom, you said I chose mediocrity over excellence. What I chose was to revolutionize the restaurant industry in our city by combining molecular gastronomy techniques with locally sourced ingredients and innovative service concepts. But you never said anything about owning restaurants, Mom protested weakly. When was I supposed to tell you? During Antonio's speeches about real estate success? During Carmen's descriptions of Kevin's medical practice? During your lectures about my embarrassing career choices? The truth settled over the room like smoke from a fire. For 3 years, I continued, Bella Vista has been featured in Food and Wine, Bon Appetit and Travel Plus leisure magazines. We've received James Beard nominations, Michelin considerations and recognition as one of America's most innovative dining destinations. I gestured around the elegant dining room that had just provided them with an unforgettable anniversary celebration. This restaurant, the one you chose for your anniversary because it represents elegance and sophistication, was built by your daughter. The failure. The embarrassment. The waitress you just disowned for lacking ambition. The weight of that realization settled over the room like a heavy blanket. So yes, Dad, I said, this was our last meal together. Not because you're disowning me, but because I'm finally ready to stop trying to earn approval from people who never bothered to see what I was building. I walked toward the kitchen one final time, then paused at the door. Happy anniversary, Mom and Dad. I hope the next 27 years bring you a better understanding of what your children are actually capable of achieving. As I pushed through the kitchen doors, I could hear voices rising behind me. Dad demanding explanations, Mom asking impossible questions, guests murmuring about the most dramatic family confrontation they'd ever witnessed. But I didn't turn around. I had a restaurant empire to run. And for the first time in 29 years, I was free to run it without worrying about family approval. The next morning would bring phone calls, apologies, and desperate attempts to rebuild relationships that had been shattered by assumptions and misunderstandings. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight I was exactly who I'd always been. Isabella Rivera, successful entrepreneur, innovative chef and former family disappointment who had just served her parents the most expensive lesson of their lives.